Hi, I'm Heather Hall.
And I'm Jordan Eastland.
And we're going to be talking about Chapter 7. So Chapter 7 is on receiving, storage, and inventory in the food service. Receiving, as defined by the book, is the point at which an organization takes legal ownership and physical possession of all items ordered.
Receiving, coordination with other departments. The key areas that are most important with coordination include purchasing, production, and accounting. The production department, such as the kitchen, depends on the purchase and receiving unit to get needed food and supplies in the storage area in time for production. For example, if the kitchen does not tell the accountant what they are running low on in a timely manner, it is harder for the accountant to find discounts on said ingredients, causing food prices to rise. So, just an example, the kitchen is really needing help with the accountant, as long as the accountant also needs help with the kitchen. So they both have to communicate. It's not just the accountant, it also has to be the kitchen communicating.
So the receiving personnel is usually a receiving clerk, and if the store operation does not have the budget to hire one specific person as the receiving clerk, then it will usually be designated to an employee that is scheduled for the time of the arrival of the delivery. The receiving clerk must have two qualities. They must be well-trained and trustworthy because they must have knowledge of food quality and be able to recognize unacceptable products, so that way they can send them back. They also must know proper documentation, and they must have well-defined authority so that their decisions at the receiving deck are not questioned. However, it is recommended that there is consistent and routine supervision at all times.
Receiving. Facilities, equipment, and sanitation. When someone thinks about clean food, they instantly think about the kitchen and its staff. But really, there's a long list of things that need to be cleaned before it makes its final destination to the plate. This is an example of sources that lead to contamination. Let's start with facilities. Facilities and the people working there and the people that are managing the equipment, they all need to be sterilized. They also need to be up to date on their pest control. And environment and animals are a big part of it too, because if the environment you're in is in an unsanitary place, then it's also going to cause a lot of problems. And equipment used to help with sanitation would be thermometers. So you would check if the food is not cold, or if it's not cold enough, then you do not want to accept that. Along with opening devices, so you can check when you receive these orders to make sure everything is there. You need forklifts to actually bring in the receiving order. Pallets, so you can keep them off the floor. Scales, so you make sure it helps you make sure that everything that you have is there because by the weight. And also you need documentation such as purchase orders, so you actually know what you are receiving on that day and on that time.
There are scheduled hours for receiving. These are usually designated in a policy or contract between the vendor and the operator. Scheduled hours for receiving are usually recommended to be mid-morning or mid-afternoon, just to avoid crossover between high demand hours of operation, or so you don't have too many deliveries all at once. Staff is recommended to get there about an hour or so before the delivery arrives, so they have time to prep and get everything ready to move to storage. And then it is also recommended that there be multiple shipments throughout the day, like we said, so that way not everything is coming in all at once.
Receiving. Security. Maximum security is important when receiving food and supplies because first, it minimizes theft, and second, it minimizes contamination. Theft can cause companies to become bankrupt or lose lots of money from recovery. Contamination could cause a company to instantly shut down from bad reviews and also illnesses. Example of a secure receiving area will include cameras, a buzzer system, making sure you have your authorized personnel, so signatures, invoice specifications on hand to check the order immediately, make sure you're actually receiving the correct stuff. That's all part of security.
The receiving process, there are 5 steps in the receiving process. There is a physical inspection of all of the items ordered against the purchase order. There is a delivery inspection, which is compared to the invoice. And then there is the acceptance of the order, completing the receiving records, and then the transfer to storage. So we're going to start off with the 2 methods of the actual receival. There's the blind method, which begins with an invoice that has all of the quantities blacked out. The receiving clerk will quantify each item in the delivery, and they will compare it to the original invoice just to make sure that they got everything that they needed. This is the unbiased way to do it, but it is also time-consuming and labor-intensive, so there are negative and positive attributes to that. The second method of receival is invoice receiving, and this is when items are checked against the purchase order. So the receiving clerk can see how much is supposed to be there, and then any deviations from those quantities should be noted. On delivery inspection, you should be prepared. You should begin your inspection immediately. Always check the temperatures. If things aren't cold enough, you should not accept them. If you see freezer burn, you should not accept things. You should always check for damage. And you should randomly open cases in large deliveries just to make sure you're getting what you ordered and to make sure everything is there. Evaluation and follow-up. Evaluation and follow-up actually continues through the use of the product. Some products, the deviations and discrepancies cannot be seen until they are actually in use. If this happens, you just have to file a discrepancy report and send it to the vendor, and then you need to send a credit memo to your accounting office to make sure that you get the money back or that everything is worked out for you. It should also be noted that after drivers drop off their delivery, they are allowed to leave. And then if there are discrepancies, you will just report them to the vendor. This allows the drivers to get back on the road so they can have their vendors' deliveries out faster. However, it does require a lot of trust between the vendor and the store operator.
Storage. There are 3 basic types of storage that must be maintained and managed for maximum shelf life of products: dry storage, refrigerated storage, and freezer storage. Storage. Dry storage. Dry storage is only intended for non-perishable foods, such as foods that does not require refrigeration, I would say such as cereal. Temperature and ventilation is still very much important when storing non-perishable foods. The storeroom arrangement is also important, for instance, keeping similar products in the same area and should always be on shelves. Humidity should stay between 50 and 70% because you don't want it to go any less than that or any more, because it will build up moisture, causing mold. And when mold comes, it's hard to get rid of, causing lots of money and sometimes closing down the store. Ambient temperature, also meaning room temperature, should also stay between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That might sound a little chilly to some, but it's actually better to be cool than hot because, like I said, heat can cause lots of mold and more problems.
Refrigerated and freezer storage is a little bit different. So there are 3 classifications as far as temperatures that products need to be held at. Produce is susceptible to freezing, so it needs to be held at the higher temperatures of 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Meat and dairy is okay between 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and frozen products should be at no more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures should be checked twice daily, and each walk-in or refrigerator or freezer should have its own thermometer. Some of them in larger corporations will have thermometers outside of the room, so that way the door does not need to be open to check the temperature. Cleanliness and organization are key aspects to food safety when it comes to storage, especially with refrigerated and frozen products. You want to make sure that you're rotating the products so that the older products are moved to the front so they are used faster, and the new products are sent to the back so that way the old products will be used first. You also need to check ripeness of everything. You need to make sure there is no spoilage, no damage, anything like that. If there is, it needs to be reported to your supervisor. Foods that have odors need to be stored away from foods that do not have odors, so that way we can avoid cross-contamination. And if there are any temperature irregularities, those also need to be reported to a supervisor. Refrigerators should be cleaned weekly. However, spills should be wiped up immediately. Covered foods are the cooked foods, so all cooked foods need to be covered, and all cooked foods need to be stored above the raw foods so we can avoid contamination of those. So like if you have cooked chicken and raw chicken, you want to make sure your cooked chicken is above your raw chicken so that way the chicken juices from the raw don't drip down and cause foodborne illnesses. You also want to check daily for broken items, anything like that, just to make sure you're keeping everybody safe.
Inventory, records, and control. A program of regular inventory contributes to product protection and cost containment. Inventory, records, and control. Receiving. This is just an example of what a receiving record would look like if you were to ever work in this field. First would be quantity, and then the unit, and the description of the items per unit. So whatever unit is coming in that day and that time, you want to make sure there's a description. So when you look at everything, you make sure it's the right stuff. Also, you want to write down the name of the vendor that is coming. So you'll know that when you see the truck or see the person, they write down their signature that it's the right vendor. And you want to make sure that you inspect the quantity and you verify everything before that person leaves, unless you have built up trust with them. Also, you want to clarify the unit price and the total cost. Finally, the initials of who took the food to the kitchen and to the storeroom. You want everything to be documented, so if there was ever something to go wrong, that we know at what point it went wrong and how we can fix that.
Storeroom issues. So the way to avoid storeroom issues is to appoint a storeroom clerk. If you cannot afford to hire someone as a full-time storeroom clerk, you can just designate that title to another employee. The storeroom should be kept locked at all times and maintained by the storeroom clerk. And the kitchen or the prep people should create a list of items needed at the beginning of the day, and they should give that to the storeroom clerk, who will then fill out a food requisition form, which you can see here. The way you fill that out is you do the item, the purchased unit, the number of units, unit price, and total cost. And then when it is entered into the storage, it will be filled out in the received by, and then if it is taken out, then the storeroom clerk will fill out the withdrawn by. Only the storeroom clerk may fill out the requisition form and take food or items from the storeroom, and then they will give them to the people who requested them. There should be multiple copies of the requisition form. There should be 2 or 3 just to make sure that we're keeping good records and to make sure that everything is documented.
Inventory, records, and control. Perpetual inventory. Perpetual inventory is the recorded of on-hand inventory in the storeroom. Example, lots of time and supervision is required to successfully purchase items as well as search for irregularities, such as misplacement of items. Everything starts in the inventory because we have to know how much we have on shelf and how much we have in the back in storage, so we know what to order and what not to order, what people are buying more of and what people are buying less of. This all helps with a successful food industry. Also, having a good record of all your food also keeps your costs down, so that's just...
Physical inventory is exactly what it sounds like. It is physically counting the inventory. This usually requires 2 people. One person will be the counter, so they will go through and physically count all of the inventory, and they will write it down in the physical inventory form, which we will get to in a minute. And the second person is the supervisor, so this person is not hands-on. They just take the numbers provided by the counter and enter them into the system to make sure that we have everything that we need. Moving on to the physical inventory form. This is an organized list of all items. You can either organize it by category and then do alphabetically inside of the categories, or you can organize it based on how items are put on the shelf in the storeroom. You also want to leave space after each category just to ensure that you have room to add new items if those do occur. And then after the physical inventory is taken, you need to find the inventory value. And the way you find the inventory value is you do the total food purchases, you add that to the beginning inventory, and then you subtract the ending inventory. Inventory should be taken pretty frequently. It should coincide with accounting periods. That's for